What would you do if the president of your HOA Karen stormed onto your land, pointed at your child, and screamed, "I'm taking him with me"? Most parents would freeze in fear, but not me, and definitely not my son. Because what she didn't know was that my boy wasn't just any 12-year-old. He'd been trained for years in federal youth programs, sharper and calmer than most adults. She thought her fake rules and clipboard gave her power, but she had just stepped into a trap she couldn't escape. By the time the sheriff arrived, her own words, her own lies, and even her own neighbors would turn against her. And when the truth came out, she would learn the hard way that this cabin, this land, and this family were never hers to control. Let me tell you how this happened, but before, make sure you like and subscribe it. She was already screaming when I opened the cabin door, her voice sharp like nails on glass, yelling that my boy didn't belong here, and that she was going to take him away. Pointing straight at my 12-year-old son, who stood quietly behind me, wide-eyed, but calm while my fists clenched. Though I didn't step aside because this woman, the so-called HOA president, had marched onto my land without permission with her clipboard like it was a weapon. And when she tried to push past me, shouting that she would call child services and have him taken from me today, my son didn't flinch, but tilted his head with eyes calm and whispered to me, "Dad, she doesn't know who she's dealing with." And the tiny smirk at the corner of his mouth told me exactly what he meant. Because this woman thought her fake rules and threats gave her power. But what she didn't know was that my son had been trained in FBI youth programs since the age of 9. Drilled in self-defense and awareness until he was sharper than most adults. And while I knew I had to play it smart, I told her calmly that if she stepped 1 foot inside this cabin, she would regret it. But she only laughed, that fake high laugh that echoed off the pine trees, saying she already called backup and I'd be in handcuffs before sunset. And when the sound of tires crunching on gravel came, my stomach dropped for a second until the black SUV rolled up with tinted windows. And she waved at it like she had just summoned her army. But when the doors opened, it wasn't her people. It was ours. And my son's smirk widened as he whispered, "They're ours." And I saw her face drain of color as one of the suited men stepped forward, saying firmly that she was trespassing on federal property. And that was the first time I saw the mighty Karen stumble back, her fake authority crumbling like wet paper. Though she tried to recover, fast clutching her clipboard like a shield and shouting that this was HOA land and she had the authority here, but the agents didn't even blink. One pulled out a file and showed her proof that this entire area was privately owned and under federal watch, and that she had been warned before. And her jaw dropped as she screamed that it was impossible, that she owned the lots and made the rules. But my son stepped forward, calm as ever, and said, "No, ma'am, you forged those papers, we already traced them." And she froze, glaring at him like she was only just realizing that the boy she thought was just a scared child was far from it. Hissing that he was a brat and to stay out of grown-up business, but he didn't back down. Instead, reaching into his backpack to pull out a small recorder and pressing play so her own voice filled the air, saying, "That boy doesn't belong here. I'm taking him with me." And her eyes went wide as she lunged forward to grab it, but the agent blocked her with one hand. And he coldly listed off her crimes, salting a minor, falsifying ownership attempted, kidnapping, saying it was enough to put her away for a long time, and desperate. Now she spun to the neighbors who had started to gather, shouting not to believe us, saying we were dangerous and didn't belong. But their eyes were fixed on her like they were finally seeing her real face, and then sirens grew louder in the distance. Red and blue lights cutting through the trees, and Karen's face twisted into false confidence as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, and she ran toward him, screaming for him to arrest me and take my boy away. But the sheriff stepped out slow, with eyes that weighed everything before speaking, asking if that was her claim, and when she screeched, "Yes," calling herself HOA president, my son stepped forward, holding the recorder, and asked the sheriff if he wanted to hear her attempt at kidnapping in her own words, and when the sheriff nodded, my boy pressed play. letting her threats echo through the evening air until she was left speechless, her voice turning into the rope around her own neck, and the sheriff finally told her she needed to step aside, that it wasn't her land or her authority. And while she screamed that I was dangerous and lying, the sheriff only asked my boy if he was okay. And my son gave a faint, calm smile and said he'd been trained for worse, which made Karen snap as she lunged at him. But the agents caught her midair, and the sheriff shook his head, saying she just made her biggest mistake, because this was the trap we had been waiting for. And as she thrashed and screamed that she ran the whole neighborhood and we would all regret this, the sheriff asked me if I was ready to show her. And my boy gave a small nod before pulling a sealed black folder from his backpack. And the second Karen saw it, her voice trembled as she demanded to know what it was. And I stepped closer, telling her it was proof, federal records, deeds, surveillance logs, everything, and that this land, even the road she was standing on, wasn't hers or the HOA's, but mine, under federal monitoring the entire time. And when my son handed the sheriff the documents, he explained calmly that she forged signatures and tried to sell off land that wasn't hers. And the sheriff read them before turning to the neighbors and saying the truth had been here the whole time, and that they all saw what she tried to do with that boy. And whispers spread through the crowd, gasps and headshakes as their eyes burned holes into her. And when she looked around for support, not a single person moved. And then one of the agents showed video footage on a tablet of her sneaking onto my porch the night before, slipping a fake HOA notice under the door while muttering that tomorrow she'll finally get rid of us. And Karen's knees buckled as she screamed. It was fake and a setup. But my boy leaned in just enough to whisper that lies always leave footprints, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes, though it quickly turned back into rage as she yanked against the agents her hair, wild shouting that she would sue us all, ruin our lives, that it was her neighborhood, but no one believed her anymore, not the neighbors, not the sheriff, not even the kids peeking from behind their parents. And the sheriff folded the papers and gave her one last chance to stop fighting, warning she was already deep enough. But instead, she snapped and ripped free of one agent, bolting at my boy and shrieking that she couldn't control him, no one would. But my son moved fast, pivoting like he'd been trained, letting her momentum carry her forward until she stumbled on the gravel and went face first into the mud. And the gasps from the crowd quickly turned into laughter as the mighty HOA president lay there covered in dirt, her clipboard broken, her voice lost, while my boy stood calm and steady, showing everyone that the loudest bully in the neighborhood had finally been exposed.